Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the High Performance HVAC podcast, where we talk about measurements and data so you can leave the opinions and guesswork to your competition. I am Adam Mufich, and this is Casey Contreras.
What's going on, guys?
We're talking to another great NCI instructor, Al Diambola.
Hello, everyone.
Now, this one's going to be a little interesting because we're going to kind of distinguish static pressure sales versus high pressure sales. Now, this could be looked at several different ways. Usually, when you hear within the industry high pressure sales, you're really thinking of almost a pushy salesman, I guess you could say, to where they're using a play on words or trying to force a customer into making a decision based on what they usually do. But what NCI guys do is instead of doing the common high pressure sales, we really start looking at static pressure, and we're looking for high static pressure and turning that into sales. So we're going to be talking to Al today, and he's going to be kind of covering what he was talking about at the NCI Summit a couple weeks ago and how we can convert high static pressure into proper sales for our customers. So, Al, why don't you kind of give us a background, your history, how you got started in all of this fun little stuff, and why don't you take it from here, bud?
All right, Casey, I appreciate it. Well, I started in HVAC when I got out of trade school in June of 1976, and my first job out of trade school, I was we're doing new construction homes, residentially, and I started roughing houses in, cutting all the holes and running the duct work. And I was making a whole $2.75 an hour back in 1976. Wow. So did that for a number of years, and don't want to get into a long story about that, but had a unique background and wasn't always doing the right thing, if you guys catch my drift. But things started to change big time for me some years later, and I ended up landing a job when I left the HVAC business, for contractors. And I forget the year, but I want to say it was 95 or 6. Again, I don't remember the year exactly, but I ended up working for a company called Retrotech. And for 3 years, 2.5 years, I went around the country and I sold blower doors for Retrotech. And when a contractor would invest in a blower door, we would provide 3 days of field training. So I seen some unique things and started out, that started my training background. And one thing that Retrotech gave me was a TSI flow hood. So I would take that on my sales calls, and it led to contractors started to call me up, and they wanted to know if I could do something called air balancing. Well, I had a flow hood, so my response was yes. And then they would come back, well, are you certified? And I would tell them no, so I didn't get any of those jobs. So I decided to look for air balance certification, and I did not have the criteria to qualify for AABC or NEBB. And then I found an organization online called the National Balancing Institute. And that led me to make a phone call to them. And there was a gentleman there by the name of Rob Falk. And, after talking to him for a while, and he was awesome to talk to, as soon as I started talking to him, I knew he was a great guy. And he said to me, he said, do you think you could get 15 people in a class and get a wholesaler to hold the class, and I can come out to New Jersey, which is where I'm from? And I said, Rob, give me a few weeks and I'll see what I can do. Well, a week and a half later, I had 15 guys committed, and a wholesaler in Fairfield, New Jersey called Loose Schwab and Case. They let me use their training room, And that's when I met Rob, and things took off from there. And he offered me a job, and I took the job. It was a long, long time ago. And then I met his partner, Dominic Carino. And I believe within a week or so of that, I sold the first on-site training we did way back then, at least when I was started. And Dominic Carino, when I got done with that phone call, we talked, and he said, "How did it go?" I says, "Oh, I got a signed contract." He was shocked. Yeah. So that is kind of how I got into NCI, and it just snowballed from there.
You were the first hire, right? Were you the first instructor? Or?
I was. And actually, when I seen Robin Falk at Summit a couple of years ago in Brandon, Missouri, she pulled me aside and she said, "Do you know you were the first person Robbie hired?" She referred to Rob, her husband, as Robbie. And I said, I kind of forgot about that, but I was the very first guy, even before Tony Doyle. He came aboard, and he was Rob's territory manager. And I was actually hired a few months before some really famous guy in Cincinnati came aboard, Jim Davis. Yeah. So I was the very first one that they hired out here, and pretty cool thing to be affiliated this long with NCI. So I was a student in my first class in 1998. I taught my first class in 1999. So from 1999 to 2014, I was conducting these classes, and it was kind of a challenge a little bit because there was not a lot of us, and we were doing a good amount of seminars, and I was always on the road.
Hey, we don't call them seminars.
No, I know we don't, but their classes back then they were seminars. Okay, but they are classes now, and I get it. But my daughter said something to me that altered my life. She was born in 2003, so now I'm in 2014. And she says, "Dad, does it bother you that you've missed most of my life, being on the road?" I was stunned. It was like getting stabbed with a knife with salt on it. And I was crushed. And I told my wife, Kimmy, I says, this is what, Diana said. And she was shocked. And she said, "What are you going to do?" I says, "Well, I think it's going to be time for me to make a change." So during that time, we ended up, because our son went to the Naval Academy. It was his senior year. And we had something called Parents Week at the Naval Academy. So one of the things the Naval Academy did for the parents is they gave us a show from the Blue Angels. So we're watching the Blue Angels do their thing, and my cell phone rings. It happens to be a headhunter I have no idea how this person got my name, phone number, anything, but he was out of Wisconsin. And so he asked me if I ever heard of a company, Danfoss. I said, "It's hard to hear right now, but I'll give you a call back when I'm done with this," which I did. And I told him I did know a little bit about Danfoss, but not a lot. But ended up going through a series of interviews, and I took a position, and I left NCI in July of 2014 only because the issues with my family, with my daughter. So not being home for her. And, hey, family always comes first. So I did that and made that change. But it was funny, not only at the Naval Academy, what happened at the Naval Academy during Parents Week, one of the things they do on the last day is they have a big party, if you will, at the Commandant of the Naval Academy's home. They live on what they call the Naval Academy refers to them, their property there, as being on the yard. So we're at the Commandant's house, the receiving line, and I would think this was probably a 10 or 12,000 square foot home. And we're just waiting, my wife, Mikey and Diana were waiting, to be received. And coming up behind us are military people, and they had a bunch of stripes on their coats. And I looked, and I says, "I'm not military. I've never been in the military, but you guys seem pretty important with all those stripes on your arms." And one of the guys, who was an admiral, He'd look at my name tag and he seen, Al. He says, Al, I'm just an admiral. Not a big deal. I said, I just do air and water balancing, not a big deal. Well, this admiral's name was Admiral Klinger. His eyes lit up. You do air balancing and water balancing? I says, I do more air than water. And we struck up a conversation. And Mikey is just shocked that an admiral's talking to me. And I said, where did you get your degree? He said, I got it here at the Naval Academy. And I asked him what year he graduated, and it struck a thought in my head when he told me the year he graduated the Naval Academy. I told him one of my best friend's brothers graduated the Naval Academy the exact same year. And he said, who was it? I said, his name was John Vina. Well, this Admiral Klinger, he just flipped out. He says, John Vina was my roommate for 4 years. He says, and how do you know John? I says, well, John's older brother, Lee, was a real good friend of mine. We played basketball. We played baseball together. He said, oh, John was a great baseball player. Lee was a great baseball player. I said, yeah, he was. He was our number 5 hitter. I said, but I was our cleanup hitter. He started laughing. But, it's amazing who you meet and things like that. So my wife was kind of amazed because I have a story for everything. So, the Naval Academy was a unique place to be. But I left NCI in July of 14, and I came back after I'd seen Dominic Carino at the memorial service for Rob Falk. And he said that he and Rob had been talking a while about bringing me back. Well, a few weeks later, we sat down and met. David Richardson was there, and we went over a few things. And then I came back in July of 22. And, one thing I forgot, because, out of sight, out of mind. But one thing I really forgot was how much fun I had teaching the classes for NCI. I love teaching these seminars, and I am so happy to be back. I know I keep saying that. I know Dom gets mad, but we always start at that. I forgot how much I love teaching the classes because it's just I love doing this, and our students seem to enjoy the content of our classes, whether the CO class or the air classes. So we're on a good road with that. So that's a little bit about my background, how I started with NCI, and it's in my soul now, just always to teach this. I will do this probably until I close my eyes, if you know what I'm saying.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So that's I don't think I've ever really heard your full story. I knew you were with RetroTech, and for the people that don't know the blower door, it's a pretty cool tool to test the leakage of a home or a commercial building or whatnot. But you have a awesome background in the trade, and that. So Casey touched on in the beginning, like what high pressure sales is. I want to kind of swing back to that. And I know there's a lot of different like sales gurus online where you could hire these people to come to your company and teach you how to sell and be more effective with selling and that. And for me, the first thing that comes to mind is like overcoming objections, right? Mm-hmm. Like they give you an obstacle and you figure out how to like it's almost like a psychology thing. How do you get past them saying no? And it just kind of seems a little bit sleazy, I wanted to ask you guys, have you ever been in a situation like that where somebody you're dealing with a salesman, not necessarily in HVAC, but a car or anything else, where somebody is using high pressure sales on you?
Oh yeah.
Do you have a story? I have one.
I've got a good one. I can't remember what it is, but me and my wife bought our first house, and it was a fixer upper. So within the first couple of weeks of moving in, she's going down to Home Depot buying all the little faucets and all that other stuff. And I come home one afternoon and she says, "Hey, we got a water sales guy coming." I'm like, "We've got water. Why do we need a water salesman?" Well, it turns out it was for water filtration and purification and all this stuff. And by that time, I went through a lot of different sales training from some really great sales trainers in the industry. I never liked their approach, but what I did take away from it was I learned how to talk to people, really. So it was beneficial for me on that stance. But this guy did everything when he came out. Kind of one of those things to where both homeowners have to be there, both owners have to be there. And I was tinkering around on the house, and she comes down. He needs both of us. I'm like, no, he doesn't. If you want it, if you like what he says, you want it, go ahead. But he demanded that both of us are sitting at the kitchen table. So, trying to shorten this story up a little bit, he started doing all the same sales tricks that I already learned. I knew what he was trying to do. And he starts off with this Lamborghini of systems. I think it was going to cost me $15,000. And I'm like, man, I can't afford anything like that. I just bought this house. We have, practically no money left over. And he's all, well, give me a minute. Let me call my office and see what they have. And he does this BS phone call, and he's like, oh, hey, do we have this kit still available? Oh, we can go ahead and cut this kit in half and then merge it with this kit. Oh, okay, that's great. And he comes back. Okay, so we can do it for $10,000 now. And I'm like, I just told you, I don't have money. And he calls again his warehouse. And now, mind you, it's 8, 9 o'clock at night. And I'm like, no warehouse is open 8, 9 o'clock at night, right? So he does his fake phone call again. Oh, we still have some of the old models left. Okay, that's great. And he dropped the price again by another couple $1,000s. And I'm like, that's it, dude. I'm done. Get out of my house. He's all, I'll tell you what, for $1,500, what we can do is just do under the kitchen sink. So you can have filtered water under the sink, and you'll have cleaner water, drinking water. And finally, I just had enough. I was tired. I had to get up the next morning and go to work. And if it wasn't for my wife, I would have grabbed him by his collar and thrown him out of my house. Because I told him, I was like, listen, what you've just made a mistake. I'm like, you keep in mind that you don't know what I do. I've been through the same types of training that you've been through. So I read through everything that you were spitting. I knew where you were coming from. What you should have done, your first mistake was recognizing your audience or who your homeowners were. At that time, we were in our mid-20s. So younger couple, not a whole lot of money in the bank. And I'm like, if you would have given us our options, good, better, best type of deal, and allowed us to make the decision of what we wanted, you would have at least walked away out of this house with, a $1,500 sale. But now, because of all the fancy play on words, that you trying to manipulate the whole situation, you get out of my house now before I throw you out of my house. And I was just absolutely livid. So, yeah, that was an interesting one. And it didn't work for me at that time. And I think, 20 years ago, it was a little different than it is now, but homeowners don't want to be sold anything. They want options. They want an opportunity to decide what they want to do for their house. And that's kind of the whole stem of what we're talking about today is find what's wrong and then offer your customers the solutions for it and allow them to make those types of decisions. But ever since that day, I've never had any other company come into my home and, or ask for quotes or any type of renovations. I do everything myself now.
Yeah, I bet you remember that company's name too. And I bet it's like in your mind, you will never use them because of that experience, that one single.
Absolutely not.
Right. Yeah. I had a similar situation with buying a truck years ago. And I remember I got to the point where I was like, yeah, I don't know. And it's like, I just got married recently. I'm like, I really need to get my wife involved with this. And I told him that, and he like shamed me. Oh, I understand that you're not at the point where you could make a decision, you're not in control of your bank. He was like, you're not in control of your bank account, or I don't remember how he put it, but it was like, Yeah, and I raised my voice and I just walked out, and it's like, I remember the place, the name of the car dealership, and it's like, I don't know, I know what he was doing. He was trying to overcome that objection,
Yep.
So, but yeah, I don't know, Al, if you have something, otherwise we get on to our.
When you asked that question, I had two stories. They were reasonably quick. One was I was in eighth grade, and I was never a great athlete, but I was reasonably okay in a few different sports. So I come home, and my parents have a salesman at the house. And way before the internet, no doubt, this is 1971 or 72. I was in eighth grade, and I played on the eighth grade basketball team, and then we had a league going on. And that night, for whatever reason, I was rarely would I shoot the ball well, and I did that night, and I ended up scoring 44 points. So when I got home, and my mom asked me, how do we do? I says, we won. We did pretty good. And she says, did you score any points? I said, I had 44. And the salesman said, and I was pretty small. I wasn't a real big guy. He said, there's no way you scored 44 points. And my father looked at him. He says, are you calling my son a liar? He says, he didn't score 44 points. I said, Dad, I scored 44 points. My father threw him out of the house, which was, I felt really good. And that guy, he was about to close the deal too. Timing's everything. But the fact that he inferred that I was a liar and I could not score 44 points really upset my father. And he threw him right out of the house. He says, get out, leave. He packed his bags and threw him outside. So, you don't insult the kids. You're on a sales call. Don't insult the kids ever.
No.
In another one, I was sold frozen foods to families, 6 months worth of meat a long, long time ago. And I remember driving an hour and a half, almost 2 hours to go to a lead, and I was not leaving until I got the sale. Because once you left the house, we were told you're never going to get a sale. So I was persistent, and the homeowner was getting frustrated. It was getting late at night, but I did not want to leave, without a sale. So, and they wanted to think it over. I says, well, I'm here. I says, I'll make you breakfast in the morning. But with that, the husband got up, went to his bedroom, and I heard that wonderful sound of a shotgun being racked. And I said, it's time for me to leave. And I left. So I was trying to put pressure on. It didn't go too well. And that was the end of that call.
See, that's interesting. You said, it's that fallacy that any of us that have ever been to any type of sales training, that if you leave without a signed contract, they will never call you back.
Correct.
But what we found early on when we started adapting the NCI approach with everything, when me and my old man, we took over the sales department. We got rid of all of our salespeople because we wanted it done a certain way that our sales team at the time would not follow. So we were going through testing, diagnostics, finding the problems, and then creating the solutions for the customer, and would customize the budget, right? To where it makes sense for them, because not everyone's got, $30,000 to do a full system renovation. And when we took that approach, there's a lot of times we walked out of the house without a signed contract, and we were okay with it. At least 60% of the time they were calling us back. And when we asked them, why did you decide to go with us? Because this is something that is very rare for a client to call us back. And they said, well, either one, they were saving up more money because they wanted to go with us, or every other contractor that came in to give them a quote, it was the same story. Add tonnage. Oh, no, the duct system is just fine. There's nothing wrong with it. We need to put something in that's high efficient, and that's going to get you what you need. And most of the time, we proved that thing wrong almost on every single one of our customers that we walked out of the house without a signature.
Yeah, I think that's a important aspect to it. So, like, one of the things that I like to do, just like you, Casey, was number one, ask a lot of questions, right?
Yeah.
And I know that, one thing we talk a lot about is the four things that customers care most about, and in which order. And we actually make some cards that you could give to your customers and have them arrange them and whatnot. But safety, health, comfort, efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
So start a conversation. What's important to you? And you could, I know some people are hesitant about this, but you could actually say, what's your budget? Because that helps you cater a solution to them, and then actually start using data to figure out what they actually need. So what they need versus what they want and how much they have to spend, instead of just shooting for the highest end option like what they did to you, Casey.
Oh, yeah.
Good stuff.
All right. So Al, you just did a presentation at Summit this year. Just happened the beginning of September. And what was your presentation called?
Implementing static pressure on every service call. And what do contractors do with the static pressure their service techs or installers bring back? So there seems to be a disconnect with some companies on how do they handle those static pressure calls. So I introduced them to, I don't know how long it's been in the NCI, on the NCI servers, the NCI important letter. And I put about a few slides together for this session from my PowerPoint I did at Summit. So for all the folks that are listening to this, this would be part of that session that I did. And number one, as in all the NCI classes that we teach, we have a little brief history. So I did some research on blood pressure. And, it goes back into the 1600s, but until this gentleman right here, Dr. Sammy, he's got this little pump, one guy, his patient sitting next to him, Dr. Samuel Siegfried Karl Ritter von Bosch. He invented the sphygmomanometer, which had water or mercury in a rubber ball. So he was the first one to use a non-invasive method of measuring blood pressure. And imagine getting your veins tapped into to get blood pressure before the sphygmomanometer was invented. It's a pretty unique thing. So he's the first guy. It was 144 years ago. And you know what? They're still using a sphygmomanometer, because I had my blood pressure checked about a month ago, and they were checking it. And I said, "Oh, you're using the old sphygmomanometer." The nurse, it was a guy nurse, he stopped. He says, "How do you know what a sphygmomanometer is?" I said, "Well, I researched it. I know." And I said, "What year was it invented?" He says, "I don't know that." He said, I told him it was invented in 1981. He says, "My nursing students don't even know any of this." So it was pretty cool. So that's the guy who started all this comparison. In NCI, we compare static pressure to blood pressure, which I believe is the next slide. And there it is. So we have two analog manometers, and just so you all know out there, the analog manometer was invented in 1953 by Frank Dwyer of Dwyer Instruments. Now, NCI, we show two manometers in our static pressure sessions. The one that's on your left, it's reading 0.5. That one's reading 0.5 because a lot of the furnaces and air handlers are rated at 0.5, and a lot are rated at 0.8, but more seem to be rated at 0.5. So that's the average static pressure that I used in my session. And the other manometer on the right, it's measuring 0.82. So where did the 0.82 come from? The 0.82 is the average static pressure that's out there based on NCI research. We have thousands of reports. I remember when Rob used to collect these a long, long time ago, even before Casey was involved with NCI. So it was what Rob Falk did was absolutely amazing. And so now we have to break down the rated static pressure to the measured static pressure and tie that into a blood pressure reading, which is what we do. And we'll show you the math on how to do this right now. That will be the next slide, I do believe.
Let me ask you something real quick. I saw somebody on Facebook yesterday, and they were asking, it was actually an engineer who was increasing the size of their return drop. And the guy did an awesome job. I think he probably went to a sheet metal shop to make this monster drop. And he said he was trying to get his equipment down closer to the rated static pressure. And there was there was a guy that commented and said, it's impossible to hit 0.5 on a gas-fired furnace with air conditioning. What do you think about that, Al?
I think he's 100% incorrect.
Yeah, I'd say
hold my beer. And I've seen it done.
Yeah, exactly.
So there are other issues, and I'm going to show one of the slides where a gentleman in Dayton, Ohio, after he enlarged the return drop, the static pressure was 0.97 using the flow grid from the Energy Conservatory, which, by the way, is a phenomenal measuring device. So when he called me, well, you know what? I'm going to come up to that in a few slides. So I don't want to take the wind out of my own sail. But how we do this is we always take our measured static pressure and divide it by the rated static pressure, and we get a multiplier. In this example, 0.82 divided by 0.5 equals 1.64. So now we want to compare the average static pressure, healthy static pressure, doctors always say is 120 over 80. So that 120 over 80, for all you folks listening, that 120 over 80 is our nameplate static pressure for our air handler or our furnace that we're testing. And again, this example is 0.5.
And why is that relatable to people, 120 over 80?
Why is it relatable?
Yeah. What is that? The normal, you said that's normal static pressure, but that also relates to something else, right?
Well, it's typically doctors want our blood pressure to be in the 120 over 80. So we at NCI take that and we compare that to the nameplate rating. So our 0.5 actually for a human blood pressure would be 120 over 80. So that's the comparison. And when we take the top number, the 120 times 1.64, our top number now is 197. And we take our bottom number, 80 times the 1.64 is 131. So that 0.82 is equal to a human being's blood pressure of 197 over 131. Now, if that was someone's body, where do you think that person would be at 197 over 131?
They're going to the doctor or something, right?
Correct. They're definitely getting medicated. And if they are medicated and it's still that high, then they got other issues. Okay. And unfortunately, I've been higher than that. I'm on blood pressure medicine. I've had a few issues with health over the past few years, but and I feel great right now. So and I keep it going. Why? Because I'm walking about probably 120 miles a month and doing some other stuff. So that is going to show our students that attend our classes how to compare human blood pressure to measured static pressure and make the comparison so the homeowners will know how serious their static pressure is. Because you have to ask a question. How many homeowners out there really know what static pressure is?
None.
Yeah, probably not a lot.
Not a lot. There might be one or two, let's say an engineer or somebody who knows something about it, but the homeowners really don't grasp the seriousness of it. And that's why we utilize static pressure as an example. Okay. And I think what
I used to tell my customers was, this isn't going to be life threatening, but it is system threatening. because how
Correct.
many of us actually have, and I mean, at those times, I know the dollar amounts are a lot higher, but $3,000 for a compressor replacement, or $1,000 for a blower motor replacement, or having me come out seasonally and having to dethaw a coil.
Yep. And that's
Or a high
a big thing. I'm wondering how many people are actually, if you go to a home and you have a blower motor replacement, are you actually looking at the cause of the blower motor replacement and making suggestions to prevent it from happening again? Right. I think that's an important thing. I
always heard, or one of my buddies told me years ago, I think it was first time I ever heard it was out of Jeff Sturgeon's mouth, was compressors and blowers do not fail. They're murdered. And us, the technicians, are the ones that are killing these things. They are not designed to fail.
Yeah. And if you want to take it back to the health comparison, it's like you have a bad blower motor and you replace the blower motor. All you're doing is giving somebody, if you're comparing that to like medical terms, you're giving somebody blood pressure medication. You're not making them healthy. You're not making the system healthy and operate the way it should. Right.
Well, it's a temporary fix. Today. I've been getting more calls of, what do? I got this variable speed motor or ECM motor that's running 1.9 inches of static.
Yep.
And then you think about, back, 20 years ago, I could replace a blower motor for, $500-$600. What do these things cost now?
Yep. A lot of money.
Yeah.
All right, Al. So I pulled up another slide here. What is this?
That's a good
This
one.
is the NCI blood pressure chart, looking at blood pressure. And the light blue column on the left is if they had low blood pressure, low hypertension. And that's what that represents. The next column, and it says normal, and right above it, it's in red letters, it says nameplate. And I put that on there just so the students at our classes would understand what we're doing here. And normal is 120 over 80. Then we have 3/10 of an inch, a half inch, and 8/10 of an inch fan. And then as we slowly go towards the right with hypertension stage 1, and we look at 0.5 column, we can see in the hypertension stage 1, anything that measures 0.59 to 0.66 would be stage 1. Then going to stage 2, it would be again half inch. It would be the 0.67 to 0.74. And then we go to the red column, the furthest one on the right, stage 3 for a half inch, 0.75 or above. The average national pressure based on NCI research, and again, that's thousands of reports collected some years ago, is 0.82. So we can say that the average static pressure with the blood pressure comparison is stage 3 at 0.82. So this is a great chart to help people understand how serious the static pressure is. Like Casey said, they're not going to die from that high blood pressure, but they're going to be medicated. And you get to a point where it's even higher, somebody could have a stroke. Okay. And even a mini stroke is not fun. Okay. So bigger strokes more difficult, but it enlightens the people as to how serious this issue potentially could be.
Now, you mentioned that the data was collected years ago. So if that was years ago, my guess would be that most of the data was based off of PSC blower motor.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, now that we switched over to all ECM, where it's either constant torque or variable speed, I would imagine those numbers are probably worse. That would be my guess. I'd love to try to dig into that a little bit, and I wonder if we could do that with Air Max.
I think we could, because the calls that I'm getting on a regular basis is everything is operating over an inch. And sometimes almost double that. I had one guy a month or so ago say, "Hey, I got a unit running at 1.9. I'm like, 1.9?
Yeah.
Like, you got to be working on something that's newer. He's all, well, absolutely.
Yeah, that's PSC blower motors are not very powerful. The ECM blower motors have a lot more. They're more capable of overcoming higher resistance. So they just keep speeding up, and they run at higher static pressures if you don't have the ductwork, and if you don't have if you have high pressure drops. Very good. All right, so this is a familiar one for me. What's this, Al?
These are NCI static pressure budgets. So in the commercial air balancing world, we get a set of plans from a design engineer, and we know what our coil drop should be and static pressure should be, that kind of stuff. But when a contractor goes into a house, they don't know, what should the coil pressure drop be? What should the filter pressure drop be? What should my pressure be of my supply duct and my return duct? So NCI put together these budgets. Again, they're not in stone, but they put you in the ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if they follow these budgets, they'll be really close to where they need to be. So on the left one with the gas furnace, 40% of the nameplate rated static pressure goes towards the evaporator coil pressure drop. And these coils are more restrictive today than they've ever been. And I remember one day when I was in vocational school, and again, it was in a different century, a long time ago in the mid 70s, but our instructor, and I went to Morris County Vocational School. I believe that was in Denville, New Jersey. And our instructor was a young guy, and he had a rough night the night before because he came in with the same clothes on, hair all messed up. And here's what he had for us at vocational school that day, way back when. He told us that there were 12 coils in the back of the room. And he said, boys, I want you to count the fins per inch on top of the coil, the middle of the coil, and the bottom of the coil. And we looked at each other. Is he kidding us or what? But some of the guys, didn't want to do it. They did whatever. The teacher went in his little office, shut the door, and there was a window. So there was about 5 of us, myself included, and we went and we did what he asked. And every evaporator coil had 8 to 12 fins per inch. So today, in the name of efficiency, how many evaporator coils have 8 to 12 fins per inch? None.
Yeah.
So now we have, 15, 16, and they're more restrictive, and motors seem to be a little smaller. So it's really hard for some of these units to overcome the coil pressure drop. And then they want one wet. So it's a major problem. So we give them the budgets for an air handler and a furnace, and it's something that they can test to and share with their customer. What's the most restrictive part of the system? Is it a coil? Is it a filter? Or is it the return duct by itself? That's a return duct is usually going to be undersized, not enough returns, and we're going to have high suction pressure. So these budgets are a great teaching tool for the customer, and any contractors that come to our classes are going to have this and be able to communicate a little more effectively on a call. So that's the beauty of the budgets.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Adam.
I was just going to say one nice thing I wanted to mention to anyone out there. I mean, we have these, we give these, we teach this in our class. This is an ATD. Is it also in DSO? Or, I'm using acronyms.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get slapped on the wrist for that.
And our residential air balancing have these as well, I believe.
Yeah. Anyway, but one thing that is pretty cool is we have these incorporated in the AirMax workflows in MeasureQuick and the TrueFlow app. So you don't actually have to remember these percentages. If you're testing and you generate a report, you'll actually get good, bad, okay, based on whatever your pressure drop and duct pressures are. And you could actually show that right to the homeowner. You don't have to break out a pen or pencil to do anything. It's all automated. Nice.
Good stuff.
These things are extremely, this is what I learned off of and actually used for a lot of years. And when I see other, guys doing their videos or testing and stuff like that, or they're trying to talk airflow issues, the airflow issue always comes down to the filter. They think that's the only airflow problem that you can possibly have in a system. And what these budgets do is teach you that it's not just the filter. There's 4 other things that could be going wrong with that system that's creating that high static pressure. And it really gets you to start venturing out into all the other components and the ductwork to really see what is causing the invisible issues that the customer's complaining about.
Yeah, and I think that when you're using these with a homeowner, it really, because now you're not, and especially if you're using Air Max, if you have a third party tool that shows you what's going on, what it does is it really builds trust. The customer doesn't have to take your word for it, and it's not an opinion anymore. It's actual measurements and numbers. So you're showing them a problem that you measured and you confirmed is a problem with a third party product. Right. And you don't need to use the app. You don't have to have Air Max. You could do it by hand. It's just a much simpler way to do it. This is a good one.
Here we go. Yeah, it is. This, I took a technical support call a few months back on a Saturday night at 8:30. And the contractor, the gentleman's name, a one-man shop down in Dayton, Ohio, named Kiefer Thompson. Great young guy. And the picture on the left, that's what he found. That's when he went into the house. And that was after he measured static. He changed the return drop and he changed the filtration system. He wanted to use that guy, Dave Koziar's V-shaped filter, but budget was a concern for the homeowner, so we did not use that. And he's glad he didn't, because even if he had a V-shaped filter, whether it's the one that Dave Koziar makes or the dust-free one that John Ellis, they're both great guys and doing good stuff, that wasn't going to solve the issue, okay? But one thing I want to point out with this is look how he tied in coming out of the filter with a short radius L, which is the way to do that. And again, this is a one-man shop doing phenomenal work. So he calls me on this, and he did a true flow grid on it. And the true flow grid, even after this repair, the static pressure was 0.97. And the duct was pulsating, the motor was pulsating. So how long would the fan motor last with the variable speed fan pulsating?
Yeah.
I don't think that module is going to last a long time, that's for sure. Okay. And the noise and the vibration. So he called me up, and actually he had left the house and he's in a parking lot down the street. We talked for an hour and a half until about 10 o'clock at night going over this. And I told him, Kiefer, you have to go back, and there's something called system effect, where the airflow is changing direction multiple times in a short space. Air doesn't like to do that. And he went back a few days later and he found it. So if you could change that slide, Adam. Okay, here was his test in results after he did fix the return drop. He's got a 4-ton system. He's moving 402 CFM a ton. External static pressure is 0.97. But look at his return. It's almost 0.4, 0.391. A massive drop in there. So this is the True Flow Grid report, which is absolutely a great report. And go to the next slide, please. And here it is. So the static pressure was 97. The return duct was pulsating. Told him to go back. He did that, and he found the system effect. And when we look at that, he's using the DG8 manometer from the Energy Conservatory, which I think is a great manometer. And from the blue hose to the green hose, we're only talking a couple of feet. You can see the return drop, the return duct, and then the drop. That's where he's measuring point A and point B. So you can see the arrows. The top arrows, the air's coming down. Then it hangs a sharp left-hand turn. Then after it makes a left, it's got to go due south. So it's got to make 3 turns in a few feet, and the pressure drop there is 0.328, just between those two ducts. We're at 0.97, so he needs to get rid of this system effect, right? So he figured out a way to do it, and I believe it shows it on the next slide. And there's the picture. Okay. Now, one thing he had, the savings grace with this is he had room in the basement to work. Sometimes, as you know, we don't have a lot of room to work in a basement. Crawl space and attics are a little different animal as well, but not all basements allow you to do that. So what he did was he added a second return, okay, and the static pressure went from 0.97 or 0.57. The pulsating stopped. He's getting 391 CFM per ton. Return plenum now is 0.14 instead of 0.39, whatever that was. And what I like about this, the summary of info and warnings, there are no warnings anymore because of what he did with this. Because of this, the guy also said, you know, Kiefer, we might as well put a new furnace on. So he ended up selling the gentleman a new furnace as well. But that was not the first part of it. The first part was that return drop, but he had to add another one, and the homeowner agreed to it because he showed the homeowner numbers, and these are the results. This is a wonderful install. And again, this is a one-man operation. So I say that to the folks listening, how do you compete with this gentleman?
Yeah.
You can.
One-man shop doing something like this. So
he came there for
Kiefer.
He went to because of he went to that job because of an airflow issue. Customer was sick and tired of dealing with the common stuff.
Yes.
And it turned into not only
uncomfortable,
just
noisy system.
Yep.
And he had to go back again because the first return pair didn't solve the issue.
Yep. And that's where a lot of these jobs lead.
Now the issue is solved.
For a little invisible airflow problem, customers finally get sick and tired of it. And it not only leads to duct renovations, but new equipment on top of it, and new equipment that's going to last a lot longer and be a heck of a lot more efficient.
Absolutely. You're taking equipment and making it perform the way it was intended by the manufacturer instead of just slapping it in and turning it on, right?
Correct. He did some great stuff. And as a matter of fact, he got a couple of referrals, and those turned into sales for him too. And what he did on his second one he did, it blew me away what he wrote on the ductwork, which was amazing. So, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But static pressure is the lifeline of what we do, okay? So, you know, based on my summit presentation, you know, I asked a few questions. How many of you use the important letter? Some of them never heard it. And, you know, if you have static pressure and fan speed data on your invoice, you can actually plot it on a fan chart, and you can communicate with your customer. You know, so what do they do with the measured data? Is a lot of times they don't do a lot with it, which is a problem as far as implementing static pressure. You know, I've been doing this a long time, and what happened way back in the 90s and early 2000s is still the same thing. Okay, it's an issue of communicating. Go ahead.
So Rob Falk, correct me if I'm wrong, Rob Falk said, if you're not measuring, you're just guessing, correct?
Dominic came up with that saying.
Dominic, okay, but then there was an ending, there was a second part to that. So if you are measuring, well, how did it go? Something like if you are measuring, but you're not doing anything with the measurements. I don't remember how it ended. I just saw the recording at Summit, but if you're not measuring and you're not doing anything with the measurements, you're just as bad as not measuring at all.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct. I think it's worse. Because you are measuring and you got good data for your customer, and now you're not communicating that with them in a good, effective way.
Yep.
That's that's a problem, no doubt. So the goal was to introduce them to these important letter. So to do this effectively, what you need to do is have someone in the office who has very good penmanship. I would not qualify for that because I kind of write in hieroglyphics, especially now that I'm older and stuff like that. I can't control my hand anymore, So somebody that has good penmanship, you want to write that down on the envelope, and you want to send your test results after every call with high static pressure. And you'll see the envelope. I think it's the next slide. And there you go. So you want to handwrite. I use David Richardson. You want somebody with good penmanship to write this, because all of you listening, okay, when you get a letter in the mail and it's handwritten, that's one that you're typically going to throw out with junk mail, or do you think you're going to open it?
Open it.
Correct. So the goal of us is we want our customer to open that high static letter, that important NCI letter. Okay. And you want to stamp the envelope, okay, with important test results enclosed. You have to do that. And on the left side of the stamp, you grade the system. Okay. And here's the grading, the prioritization rules of equipment. If it's an A, that means it's 15 plus year old. A B, it's a 10 to 14 year old system. A C is 5 to 9, and a D is less than 5. Okay, so there's things on there that are going to make the person want to open the letter. Okay, and then they open the letter, and then they'll read it. And what you have to do for your contractors out there, you need to track this. You sent the letter, but you want to follow up with that, like a week later with a phone call, and asking the people if they had a chance to read the letter, what questions do they have, and that kind of stuff. And you want to find a way to get back out to use that as a teaching tool to educate your customer on system performance. So that's the beauty of the important NCI letter.
So, and I think that's pretty beneficial too, because a lot of contractors are like, hey, I don't have time to be making these repairs. You showed pictures, which, by the way, guys, if you're listening to the audio version of this, if you go to YouTube, there should be a version where you could actually see the slides on there. But in the middle of the summer, in the heat of summer, a lot of contractors are not going to want to install a new return drop and do all this when they have, a ton of calls coming in, no cooling calls and that. But you could always go back, send this letter a month or 2 months later when you start slowing down, and now you're drumming up work for when in the shoulder seat.
Yep.
You are correct, Mr. Adam. Okay. Also, with the important letter is you send the static pressure. Why does it matter, that chart? We have these by the hundreds in the office. You send that out. And again, we want to use this as an education tool to educate the customers and the comparison to the blood pressure. So that goes into the envelope as well, the important test letter envelope. Oh. This is what Kiefer did on his second job. When you look at that picture on the left-hand side of your screen, what he did was he took his 0.5 rated static pressure and he divided it by his measured static pressure, which was 1.02. So he took the 1.02 and he times it by the 120 over 80, and it came out to be 244 over 163. So. Wow. To anyone watching this, if someone had blood pressure of 244 over 163, where do you think they might be?
In the morgue.
Yep.
Some people, but you were in the back of an ambulance, you're going to the hospital. And I've been there a few times. But what I love what he did was he actually wrote a heartbeat on the duct, the beep, 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 and then he flatlined it. So every time the homeowner would walk by, they would see that. So I thought that was pretty ingenious to do something like that. But that turned into a second replacement where he modified the duct work and sold a new piece of equipment. So this young man is on fire. He's doing great stuff. And I always go, how do you compete with someone who's a little better than you? And I remember asking my uncle that a long, long time ago. He was a world-class boxer, fought Ray Robinson for the welterweight title, and a guy named Johnny Branton, who was out of Chicago, for the welterweight title. And I asked Uncle Charlie, I said, hey, Uncle, I seen a few of the rounds when you fought Ray Robinson. You didn't hit him that much. His response was amazing to me. He said, Alphonse, He said, I blocked every punch that I could see. Touche. And he did. He blocked him with his face. But, the fact that he went 50 rounds with Ray. But, HVAC, what happens if a competitor has better diagnostic skills than you? How do you compete? And that's where we would like to raise the bar for everyone who attends our classes.
Yeah. And if you're not watching the YouTube or the video version of this, Kiefer also, he didn't just write the heartbeat with the flat line. He wrote what a normal blood pressure would be and compared it to a normal static pressure. And then he showed what a high blood pressure would be with the actual measured static pressure. And then right under that, he drew a skull with crossbones.
Yep.
So I thought that's pretty funny. That if that doesn't get a homeowner to think, I mean, what would,
Yeah. And again, it's different than what most are doing, right? You got units of measurement, and customers want to know how their systems are supposed to operate. And if you guys have the ability to test, measure, and conversate and find those invisible pain points that your customers suffer from, holy moly. I mean, it completely changes the typical sales approach to this is what's wrong. This is what we need to do to make it right. Is this something you want to go ahead and execute?
Right. And like one other thing too, I bring this up a lot, like when I'm teaching an airflow class, is before I really started to become in tune with airflow and how things worked, I couldn't tell you how many times I'd replace a furnace or air handler with a PSC blower motor. And then you install the same size system with a variable speed blower motor, and the thing sounds like a rocket ship when you start it up. And the thing that really bothered me was when I would talk to the customers about their new equipment, I'm like, oh, it's quiet. You're going to love it. And then it's like they got to turn up the TV when they're watching their Desperate Housewives at the end of the night. You know what I mean? So if you could figure that out before you install a new system and address that up front, you're selling solutions to a problem they don't really even, nobody told them they had in the first place. Uh-oh.
Yep. Oh, we're good. Yeah, and just to add to that, I can't remember what year it was, but I was only a couple years into the industry, and the new claim to fame or the next best component is when they started coming out with retrofit ECMs. And I went to a little training session on it. And they were talking about how great these things are. They're going to save so much energy. They're going to save the planet and do this and do that. Never going to have an airflow problem again. And mind you, this was before I became an airhead. And so I started throwing these things into furnaces that had PSCs all over the place, promising the same things that I was promised, right, to my customers. And first summer, I'm getting phone calls. You told me I was going to save money. My electric bill actually went up. You said this thing was going to be quiet. The sound is actually increased. What is wrong with these things? I do not like it. Rip it out. And then that's when I started understanding that how these motors actually work. And if they're under that static pressure, that extreme static pressure, they're not going to function the way everyone claimed that they would function. And we're still, that was, again, probably 20 years ago, and we're still at that point.
Let me ask you this, Casey. I'm curious to see what your thoughts are on this. So if there's a company that is not using, and I'm not just saying on the sales side, but the service side that could generate sales, what do you think a company that's not using static pressure, what do you think would be the biggest obstacle for them to start implementing it in their company?
The biggest obstacle, I would say, is probably just maybe a lack of understanding, not knowing what you don't know, and maybe even accepting it on your own installs. And when I went through my first airflow class, I'm like, I'm not going to go and test my stuff. There's no stinking way I'm going to do that, because I don't want to show my customer that I suck, right? But when I can't remember at the time what NCI instructor, it was probably Rob, but he was saying, don't let the feelings of guilt, persuade you against these things. This is the stuff that you're learning is almost like a specialty, right? It's not within the realm of just the typical HVAC technician, right? You're learning something additional to all the little components and electrical measurements and refrigerant and things like that. So if customers go after you and tell you, well, you put it in, well, yeah, I put the equipment in, but I don't really focus on the ductwork until now. We've invested time and money into educating ourselves to a new level compared to what we were before. And we gave you previously everything that you asked for. Now we're saying, hey, let's make this thing work even better. And we're one of the companies that can do that. So coming to terms with potentially some bad approaches on whatever you guys may be doing out there. But then just jumping in full boat and just start off with static pressure, start off with the budgets that Al just showed you and get a good understanding with it. Heck, even do your own house first. We always recommend doing that just to get a little practice in and understand the changes. When you make one change, what happens to other things? Well, Al's not hearing us. Al, if you can hear us, speak. That is crazy. Okay. Guys, because we're having some technical difficulty coming from Al, we're just going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. Now, of course, at any time, if you ever need to get a hold of us, you can call us directly at National Comfort Institute headquarters, and they will put you in touch with one of us. Now, some things to really think about. Now, if you're a homeowner watching our antics right now, some advice for you guys. If you want a proper evaluation of your system, you really got to do some digging and find a contractor that measures airflow, that knows how to measure airflow, and even combustion, the performance of your heating system, and the levels of flue gases. All these things are incredibly important before you make a final decision. And of course, you can get multiple quotes, and the airhead guy, the NCI guy, the guy that knows stuff about airflow and combustion, they will stand out. Now, as far as pricing goes, they're most likely going to be more expensive than just a common guy coming in just to sell you a piece of equipment. But just from experience, it is worth going with the guy that knows what they're looking at, knows how to test all the invisible issues. And for you guys out in the industry, contractors, technicians, maintenance guys, installers, when you have the opportunity to learn about static pressure and really dive deep with it and get a good understanding, it will change your life, especially when you run with it and you start understanding how airflow actually works and how it degrades all of your guys' systems out there if we're not paying attention to it. So, Adam, you got any advice or recommendations?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, like, if you're not doing it, just start testing. Start testing on your own house, start testing on your families and that, and try to start figuring out what is going on. We offer tons of training. If you're not ready for that training, start researching whatever you can. Just always try to continue learning. That was one of the biggest things that I was guilty of, is I got to a certain point and I hit a ceiling and I'm like, I know all I need to know.
Yeah.
But it's like the Dunning-Kruger effect. I didn't know what I didn't know. And once I figured that out, I was on a journey, and I'm still on that journey right now. I still learn things all the time.
Yeah.
Just continue to learn, continue to grow. And I think that's the best thing you could do for your company.
Yeah. Yeah. And themselves. I mean, really is what it comes down to.
All right. Want to take us out?
Yeah, we'll do that. So that's the end of the ride on the High Performance HVAC podcast, guys. If you've got questions, ideas, or a puzzle that you need help with, send them to our emails. Out here, we measure it all from airflow to refrigerant and combustion, because in this trade, if you don't measure, you're just guessing. And hey, subscribe, like, follow, do all the little clicky buttons that is required to kind of see all these things come at you all the time. And until next time, guys, thanks for watching.
Thank you.